Beijing warned that it would retaliate. We had word of that over the weekend when President Trump was readying these tariffs. Let's just take a look at some of the numbers we're talking about here. You mentioned $60 billion. That's the amount that China will tax U.S. imports into China. But compare that to what Donald Trump has done, imposing new duties on some $200 billion worth of Chinese imports into the United States. Now, we're talking about thousands of different product lines, everything from crops to consumer products, even to aeroplane parts as well, are on these lists of the tariffs that these two countries are now hitting each other with. President Trump, we know, has long-standing complaints about China's trade practices. He says they're unfair. He accuses China of trying to force U.S. trade partners to hand over their trade secrets. That's at the heart of what he's doing and why he's trying to leverage China into changing its habits. Here's what President Trump had to say a little earlier this Tuesday.
China's been taking advantage of the United States for a long time, and that's not happening anymore. We can't let that happen. I have a great relationship with President Xi. He's a friend of mine, but we can't, I've been telling him we can't let it happen. So we may make a deal at some point.
Maybe make a deal. Mike, that was Poland's president sitting next to President Trump there in the White House. He was talking as well about trade wars with the European Union, of which Poland is a member state, but also Canada and Mexico. So you get the idea, this is truly a global trade war. But those numbers that China and the US are swapping, they dwarf any of the trade disputes that President Trump has on his plate right now.
The interesting thing, Owen, he says it may make a deal, but it seems like they're going more and more in this direction. What are the prospects for resolving this trade war when both sides are escalating things?
Yeah, and it's so confusing right now. Not for the first time, we get different messages from the Trump administration. Just days ago, we were being told that maybe a Chinese trade delegation could come back to Washington, D.C. to try and pick up on tentative talks to try and resolve this long-standing trade dispute. But the problem for China is it already said, look, if Donald Trump goes ahead with these tariffs, these talks really won't go anywhere. Let's hear now from China's foreign ministry.
Here I want to reiterate that in response to the action taken by the U.S. side, China has to take necessary countermeasures to defend its own legitimate rights and interests and safeguard the global order of free trade. The U.S. action has brought new uncertainties to the trade negotiations between the two sides. Previously, we expressed our stance on China-U.S. trade issues many times, and I think it has already been made clear for everybody.
The short answer, Mike, is it doesn't seem these two sides have much to talk about right now, although it should be noted they did pull their punches a little bit in terms of the level of tariffs that they're imposing, the actual amount of duties they're imposing. So for some analysts, maybe there's a little bit of wiggle room here. And yet when you look at the bigger picture, there may even be more to come. President Trump has been talking about hitting China with even more taxes, maybe duties on as much as $267 billion. At that point, we're talking about one giant tax on all of China's exports to the US. And the concern for consumers and businesses is at that point, they simply wouldn't be spared the financial pain from this growing trade battle. Mike.
Owen Fairclough in our newsroom, thanks so much.